Having been born in the Confederate state of Florida, in Jacksonville to be exact, my outlook on the world was painted by that. And as everyone knows, in Confederate states they were very prejudiced, and they made life kind of difficult for people of color. And my mother would not take us downtown, and I used to be kind of upset about that. But she did not want us to see the brutality of racism, and they protected us from it. And when we bought new clothes, we had to be measured for the clothes and not able to go in the store. We were not able to go in the store and try them on. And we attended a 7-day Adventist school. And at that school, we were taught many things, but the thing I really remember about the school, we used to have something called Negro history. And I only use the word Negro as a direct quote. That word should be barred from any language, because in American society, the Negro is an invention. And it came from the Spanish word or the Portuguese word, los negros, the blacks. And going through that life, and going through a 7-day attending a 7-day Adventist school, that was my world. At our school, they taught us about ourselves, and that was obviously to make us feel good about ourselves, because the literature was just terrible about our people, or people of color in general. And we would learn about how they plan to get rid of all of the so-called Indians. And we were supposed to be people very inferior. We couldn't do anything without someone giving us orders. And all of these things shaped my way of thinking in the world and about the world. And when I was in about the 3rd grade, in Sabbath school, because we were 7-day Adventists, we went to church on Saturday. In the morning they had what they call a special lesson for us, and we had a little paper that was called Our Friend. And that day the teacher was discussing Noah and the ark. And they got to the part where Noah was drunk, and he was supposed to have been naked. And he asked God to curse the sun that did not help him when he was naked, didn't cover him up. And that kind of upset some of us in the class, because afterwards we all went into the boys' bathroom and we talked about what we had just viewed. And we were kind of upset about it. So we asked each other, do you believe that? And he said, no, I don't believe it. And, everyone agreed that was in the bathroom they didn't believe it. Now, here's our logic at that time. We didn't believe it because we were taught that you weren't supposed to smoke and drink. So how could God help someone who was drunk? So that was our logic. And that incident caused me to look at many things. And my mother had a young brother in New York, and we would come to visit him in the summertime, because my mother was really taking care of Grandpa and Grandma. And they wanted her to have some kind of relaxation in the summertime. So we would go up to New York and stay with our aunt and our uncle. And one day I wandered off, and I ended up down at 125th Street and 7th Avenue and found this bookstore. I went in the bookstore. I didn't have any money or anything. I just walked in the bookstore. And I started talking to this man that looks like Haile Selassie. And I was talking with him, and I found out he was the owner, and his name was Mr. Louis Michaud. And nothing became of that. He let me look around at all of the books and everything, so it was nothing to it. However, every opportunity I had gotten after that, I would go down to his bookstore. And he would show me around. So one day I mentioned to him about this story about Noah. And he gave me a book, a hardcover book, which I have until this day in my library. And it was called The Bible Unmasked. And I read that book. I have reread it, and it kind of shaped my thinking. And when you are young and you're reading and you're thinking, you're trying to figure out what kind of world you're living in. And Harlem was a very interesting place because most of the people in Harlem, the store owners and everything, looked like me, the same as in the South. And when we did venture out once in a while, there were certain subtleties about the North. One of the subtleties about the North was there was a store called Abraham and Straus in Brooklyn. And I noted that the elevator operators were all very light. They spoke English very well, and they announced what was on each floor as the elevator would stop at that floor. They would name the items that you would shop for on that floor. And they wore uniforms. And then I noticed that people that had jobs of color, they all seemed to wear uniforms. And I didn't understand that, because at least in Florida, I knew people who wore suits every day. And we had a business, and it was across the street from the Afro-American building. And at the Afro-American building, those were all people of color. They were a very wealthy family. And the patriarch of that family, Dr. I.E. Williams, used to talk to me when I would deliver his sandwiches or his soda or whatever. And he just would talk to me, and I'm certain I was not the only one. He would ask me what I wanted to do, what I was going to go to school for, and just talk to me about things. And I noticed in the North, people did not really take that much time with you, because, you know, you were out playing stickball or whatever you were playing at the time. And I was one of those youngsters that wanted to know more about our people. And I like to sit around the elders in New York who talked about Marcus Garvey and what the Harlem Renaissance was like and things of that sort. I used to like that. That to me was very fascinating. And through all of that experience and growing up, you had white supremacy in the South. And I can remember when we were young and just be walking through the park, leaving the east side to go over to the west side. They would see us and they would call us bad names and things of that sort. And when kite season came, now we were not allowed to sit down in the park. And when kite season came, there was a very large field and we would all be out there flying our kites. And some of us were very good at flying our kites, making it do all kinds of tricks. And then sometimes when you would best one of the so-called youngsters of European descent, they would still say to you, they said, well, at least I'm white. And things that made you uncomfortable. And why that make you uncomfortable is because when we would go to school, we usually walked to school. And youngsters from the west side, and we would just pick each other up as we walked along. You just pick people up but we would always try to stay in our own neighborhoods. In other words, when we were walking, we would walk and try to find our own neighborhoods to go to school through. Because that way that you had less trouble with people. And I appreciated the school because it taught us as much as they could about ourselves. Like I knew about the Pittsburgh Courier. I knew about the Afro-American, the Baltimore paper. I knew about the paper in Chicago, the Defender, whom Mr. Abbott was always asking people of color to move to the north. And I remember that very well. However, I don't think the North was any better than the South in some aspects. Maybe I had more opportunities or whatever. But still I saw a lot of segregation. There were places that the family say, well, don't go there. You're not welcome if you go to eat in such and such a place, and things of that sort. So I equated it with what I lived in the South. And I think when I'm thinking back on all of the incidents that happened, and I think the teachers in the school and the bookstore really assists me because I was emerging myself and finding out about our people. Because Florida was a very interesting place. In Florida, you had an awful lot of marriages between Spanish-speaking people, the indigenous people, so-called Indians. But one thing about the South, they let you know that you weren't white, so we all lived and resided in the same neighborhood. So I was very clear on that, very clear. And I noticed in the North, as well in the South, people that were lighter skinned thought in many instances that they were better. Just like a dark-skinned man would marry a very light-skinned woman, or a woman with straight hair, or whatever. And I didn't understand that at the time, and at that time, the cosmetic companies sold a product called bleaching cream. And you had these brown-skinned, dark-skinned, brown-skinned women, and they would be using this bleaching cream to make themselves lighter. And that was really very eye-opening to see that. So, all in all, I think that we have not progressed that much even at my age today. There has been some alterations. However, again, I will say, well, where the world is at with its technology and everything, people of color are still being taken advantage of. They are the poorest, even though like Africa is one of the wealthiest continents in the world, and yet the people are the poorest. And we have to look at that, because we should be looking at all people should have the opportunity to live a good life. You don't have to be rich, but just to have the basic things in life. And from my travels, I feel that I have seen that.